And then, okay, I'm just trying to make sure that our live streaming is up and running. I apologize for the delay, but we're about to get started any second now, once I confirm that everything is up and running.
Is it being live streamed or recorded? Because I know sometimes you say it's being live streamed and it's just being recorded.
It is being live streamed on, um, it is currently being live streamed on Facebook. And I'm just waiting for it to tell me that Facebook is up and running. And it says that it's waiting for a signal. If this doesn't work, then we are recording to, and we'll just upload it later. But it should be. Technology is awesome until it ain't. So let's go ahead and get started. And I want to be respectful of everyone's time who's here so far, and we anticipate that others will be here as well. So let's begin with our land acknowledgement and reparations acknowledgement. Place matters. It is essential to acknowledge the land that we are on. It is a land that has been stolen twice over. First by the Spanish in 1521 and later by the United States government in 1852. With the signing of the Treaty of Guadalupe, Mexico ceded 55% of its territory, including parts of present-day Arizona, California, New Mexico, Texas, Colorado, Nevada, and Utah, to the United States. The land that Denver sits on originally belonged to the Arapaho tribe, as laid out in the 1851 Treaty of Fort Laramie. When gold was discovered in the late 1850s, white settlers arrived in the area and began asserting their rights to the land. In 1864, the Sand Creek Massacre resulted in the deaths of hundreds of Arapaho and Cheyenne people, and soon after, these nations would be relocated out of Colorado. We acknowledge the Denver Task Force to Reimagine Policing and Public Safety assembles on land that was originally stewarded by indigenous peoples, and that we have a moral and spiritual obligation to right the historic wrongs that have been committed by local, state, and federal governments. Acknowledging that place matters is not forgetting the cultural, historical, environmental, social, and political context of the land that we're sitting on, as well as working to undo the harm that has been caused by the history of this nation. Reparations acknowledgement. Healing, reconciliations, and reparations matter. It is essential to acknowledge that the United States of America was established on the forced labor of Africans who were kidnapped and enslaved. After the end of slavery in 1865, local, state, and federal governments conspired through legislation and active terrorism to keep the people called Negroes, Blacks, and African Americans as a permanent underclass. We acknowledge that the Denver Task Force to Reimagine Policing and Public Safety and all Americans benefit in one way or another from the exploitation of Blacks for nearly 400 years in this nation. We further acknowledge that we have a moral and spiritual obligation to right the historic wrongs that have been committed by local, state, and federal governments. It is the desire of the task force to replace the system of white supremacy and oppression with a system of true justice, in which everyone is treated fairly and those who need the most help get it. It's not just enough to tear down one oppressive system and then to replace it with another oppressive system. We've seen that over and over again. If we look at world history, we had the first great empire would, of course, been the Egyptians, the Babylonians, the Assyrians, or the Assyrians, then the Babylonians, then the Medes and Persians, followed by the Greeks, followed by the Romans, followed by various other empires and nations. And what we continued to have throughout our history was one oppressive government, oppressive group of powerful people oppressing another group until they were overthrown and another oppressive system was set up in its place. That's not our desire here. Our desire here is not to overthrow white supremacy and the greed that comes from multinational corporations, et cetera, and to replace it with, blacks oppressing everyone, Asians oppressing everyone, whoever it may be. We just now have a new king on the throne executing the oppression. What we really need in this world is for oppression to end and for justice to truly reign. And we hope that the work that we do here in this corner, there's so many areas, whether it's health, whether it's economics or whatever it may be, there's so many areas. We seek to see how we can do that in the area of policing and public safety. To that end, let us ground ourselves with a moment of meditation, reflection, and preparation. Okay, thank you so very much, everyone. And I want to again take this opportunity to thank each of you for coming here. And we're going to jump right into it. We have asked the Independent Monitor, Liz Castle, to please come and join with us today. And we appreciate her being with us. There was a report that was put out by the office, by the auditor, Denver auditor Tim O'Brien, in reference to the Independent Monitor, the work of the Independent Monitor, and various findings, four findings that his office developed. But before we do that, I want to just do some level setting, and then we're going to go to Monitor Castle. But first, I want to do some level setting. I've asked Dr. Calderon if she'd be so kind. She has been working along with others in the community on oversight before the city of Denver even had an independent monitor. She was one of the main ones pushing that we have this office in the first place. So I've asked Dr. Calderon to do some level setting here and to do a little historical dive as to why, one, the office is important to us in the first place, but then also to have a conversation about why this report from the auditor's office even matters. So, Dr. Calderon, let me take a second and make you co-host, and then that way you can share your screen. I understand that you've developed a brief PowerPoint presentation to kind of take us through this so people can get the historical context, and then we'll go into our question and answer period. We're so thankful to have the independent monitor with us this evening, and we're going to come to her in just a moment. Dr. Calderon?
Yes, and thank you, Director Perez Castle, and also Nicole from her office
Thank you.
for being here. And this has been a topic of discussion, but it's such a kind of a moving pieces thing that we thought let's just give it some context because these terms can get very technical and they don't need to be. And we will, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to just present a quick overview of what it is that we are here to discuss tonight, and then ask the monitor to weigh in on if there's anything in the slides that we need to correct, And then Dr. Davis has specific questions that we've also put together. So I'm going to go ahead and share my page. Hold on one second because what I'm looking for is not popping up. Okay, I think I have now. Let me see if that works. Right. Sorry, I am having some technical issues.
Would you like for me to start presenting? I know you shared a copy with me.
Yeah, why don't you share it and then I'll just tell you when to switch the slides.
Sounds fair. This is how you hit the slideshow. Okay, I'm ready.
Awesome. Okay, and Monitor Castle can explain this way better, but we're also going to use this when we talk to other groups about what it is that we're trying to go for. So for those who are less familiar, who are watching this now or later, the Office of the Independent Monitor is a civilian oversight office for the Denver Police and Sheriff Departments. They review misconduct, investigations, and discipline, make recommendations to improve policies, practices, and training, and they exist to increase public accountability for law enforcement. And it really was an office that the community pushed for around 2004, I think, with the murder of Paul Childs, a 15-year-old Black disabled boy by a Denver police officer. Next. So this goes into when we've been looking into the auditor's report, they had critique about what was shared and could not be shared. So here's our interpretation in a nutshell. What our understanding is the Office of the Independent Monitor can share are trends and patterns in complaints, investigations, and discipline. So this means statistics and summaries without identifying information, timeliness, data for investigations and discipline process, descriptions of oversight roles and methods, publicly released policy and practice recommendations, uh, uh, aggregated or anonymized findings. So again, no names that are used, progress on audit recommendations and reforms. Okay. But what can't they share? And this was something that was also picked up in the auditor's report. So specific disciplinary recommendations in individual cases. And in reading the monitor's response to this is because some of these issues overlap into human resource issues, which of course are protected and confidential. So they can't share internal critiques of investigations, so those specifics. They can't share draft analysis and pre-decision discussions. So in other words, if the monitor says, hey, we're recommending this, and they're talking that over with the chief, but then the chief of police rejects it, we don't know any of that. They can't share internal communications during deliberations while they are contemplating discipline. And they can't release information identifying the officers, deputies, or complainants. Next. So what is deliberative process privilege? It is a legal rule that protects internal government discussions. It allows staff to speak openly while decisions are still being made. It covers drafts, recommendations, and internal debates. It applies to the police and sheriff discipline process. So it's what we are as a public cannot be privy to. All of these things get discussed without us even knowing about it. Go ahead. So why does this limit transparency? So the public often cannot see the monitor's recommendations. Therefore, it is difficult to know if agencies are following their oversight guidance. Even the city auditor had limited access to some information. So you think about it, the city auditor is charged with looking at all city processes, and then coming up with a report. And it's difficult to measure whether the funds from our taxpayer dollars are being used wisely if they don't have transparency. So this limits visible proof of accountability. Next. So why the secrecy? The Office of the Independent Monitor says it is legally required to withhold certain information, and this is based on Denver ordinances and city attorney interpretations. So on the one hand, we have an ordinance that created the monitor's office with all of the rules of what can and can't be done, but it's also more broad. And then the city attorney interprets it in very specific ways. So this is one of the tensions, is because the city attorney's office protects the mayor and protects the police. And they also get final say on what the monitor is able to say in their reports. And that is a concern of the auditor's office. It has been a concern of myself and others who've been watching and helped to form this office, that it appears to be a conflict of interest to have the city attorney basically sign off on what the monitor can and can't share with the public. A fix that has been proposed is for the monitor to have their own attorney that they can consult with, but that also requires funding. And in this budget crisis, it's unlikely that they will get their own attorney. And it's something that was asked for even before our current monitor was here. The 2025 audit found conflicting mandates. So on the one hand, they're supposed to protect the deliberate process and deliberative privilege process. And on the other hand, they're supposed to report to the public on the kind of work that they're doing. So those two things are in conflict. Some information may be shareable in broader forms, and that's what we're here to kind of talk about as well. Okay, next. So can the law be changed? And it is our position that yes, it can. City Council has authority to act, to clarify or amend ordinances, to narrow how deliberative process privilege is applied, to require more public reporting, and to fund independent legal counsel. So yes, it can be done. We don't have to be stuck with this situation that the auditor is concerned about, that members of the public are concerned about, and potentially that the monitor is concerned about. Next. So what is the monitor's office doing next? From what we're able to tell, and of course she'll be able to tell us in just a minute, but what we're able to tell through her response to the auditor's report and through the media reporting, reevaluating legal limits of deliberative process privilege. So this means exploring ways to publish more information, improving reporting on timeliness and trends, clarifying what is legally restricted versus policy choices, updating future reports to increase transparency. Next. So what should the community expect? We expect timely oversight of misconduct cases. I think everybody does. And I think this has been the rub with the push to reduce accountability from the police department's end through evidence-based discipline is to, everyone agrees that the timeliness factor is an issue. So we all want to work on that. Visibility into whether recommendations are made. We want clarity on whether agencies accept or reject guidance. We have no idea, honestly, if the monitor is recommending something and it's rejected by the police chief or the sheriff, we don't know. So we don't know if maybe our suggestions as community were brought up, were they accepted, or were they rejected? So things are kind of going into a black box. And evidence that oversight leads to real change. We would also like clear explanation of the legal limits. Okay, go ahead. Why this matters. Civilian oversight only works if the public can evaluate it. Transparency builds trust and accountability. So we have no doubt that the monitor is, doing what she's supposed to be doing. And it's not just her, right? It's a whole office of people. But if we can't measure it, that's where the questions come up. And if we're not able to measure it, it may be because she's not able to tell us. And that's what we're trying to get at, is how can we loosen up some of those rules to increase transparency, and how can we partner with her office to do that? Too much secrecy undermines confidence. When we hear repeatedly, I can't discuss it with you because it's deliberative process, process privilege, deliberative privilege process. What do we, everything becomes a secret. And then it starts sounding like a lot of it echoes what we hear a lot from the police department is, we can't discuss that with you. Even when people inside the system act in good faith, we don't know that that's what they're doing because it's not being shared. Next. So the bottom line, some confidentiality is required by law, but the public deserves enough information to know oversight is real. And transparency is essential for meaningful accountability. So that's my last slide, and I'm sure Monitor Perez Castle has responses to that. And so to get to that, Dr. Davis has crafted, and actually several of us crafted with Dr. Davis, some questions to get to it. And that's also to keep this to be more conversational and less legalese. We want things explained in plain language for people to understand why these issues are important, why we should care about them, and what we can do about them. So I'm actually going to turn it back over to Dr. Davis with our questions so that the monitor can respond to what we're presenting.
First of all, I want to say thank you, Dr. Calderon, for the presentation. And I think you really hit the nail right on the head as to why this is so important. I also want to say thank you so much to Monitor Perez Castle, sorry, for being with us, not only being with us today. I really appreciate how you have engaged community since you have taken this office. And I want to just also give a shout out to your right hand in that area, Nicole Taylor, who does so much work in making sure that you are aware of what's going on in the community, that you're present, things of that nature. So thank you so much, both of you. And so let me just start off by giving you an opportunity. Dr. Calderon shared a presentation. This kind of can be your opening statement before we do a deep dive into specific questions. But Dr. Calderon just shared a presentation. If there's any responses that you would like to share with that, and then I'm gonna throw another question on top of it. That's kind of like an opening for you to give an opening statement. So having several conversations with various people in the community who are in this space around public safety, how would you respond to someone who says that this report appears to suggest that you're putting the desires of DPD and DSD ahead of the community's demand for transparent oversight? So I want to set that up kind of like to lead you into your opening statement, both of what Dr. Calderon said and the question that I just asked as well. Monitor?
Good evening, everyone. I want to thank you so much for this opportunity, and am grateful for the opportunity to have this engagement because I think that your ideas and your views and your considerations are important. Much of what we agreed to do with the auditor was review all of this and take into consideration what, if anything, we can do differently and what, if anything, that we can do better. I don't have an a scintilla of the history that Dr. Calderon has with oversight, and that kind of perspective is really helpful to me and to my office in terms of being there from the beginning and watching as the agency has grown and the agency continues to grow, and struggles that have been had before. So I really appreciate. I also appreciate you being so patient with me. I completely lost my voice. The last time I was supposed to appear, I had laryngitis for about 3 weeks. Um, so, thank you for allowing me another opportunity to speak to you all. I think I would start with, and hopefully this addresses the question that you just posed, is um, there are kind of two parts to the audit. One part is kind of foundational, their opinion um, about what our office does, and whether or not we are transparent, and in citing to certain ordinances. And then there are the recommendations. We've agreed to all of the recommendations made by the auditor's office. Again, I think it is good to review where you are, ordinance we have, whether any ordinance changes are needed. Where I take exception is the auditor's comment that we are not a transparent agency, and we lack transparency in the oversight role. Our office has been producing information, reports for community. We are incredibly transparent. We are the office of George Floyd reports, the Michael Marshall report, many specific reports, and in addition to all of our annual reports that contain information for the public to use to determine if the departments are meeting community expectations. I think the frustration for the auditor and the basis of the claim is that they did not have access to specific individual cases. I don't want to get into too much legalese, but the deliberative process privilege belongs to the mayor of the city and county of Denver, and the specific information that is contained in the database that is used by both the departments and the OIM belongs to the Department of Safety, and they were not waiving that privilege as well. So I understand his frustration, but he is bound by the ordinance as well as we are. So to say that we're not transparent is oversimplistic, and in my opinion was sensational, and not accurate, as to the work we do. And I can get into more specifics about his complaints and address specific issues, but that's kind of by way of introduction.
And let me just say, as it relates to perception, so there's reality, there's facts, there's perception. The perception, and I'm going to be very transparent with you here, Monitor, that I have heard from individuals in the community, some on this call, some who are not on this call right now. Maybe they'll join later. But I have heard the frustration that there's not adequate information coming from your office that lets us know what's really going on inside DPD and how they're treating citizens. So, what and I know this is one of the questions we're going to hit later, but I'm just thinking, how does your office reassure community? What steps can be taken to reassure community that in fact law enforcement is being held accountable for when they do harm to community, and that community is aware when that is taking place and how you are going about that?
So there's first of all, we are limited as to some specific information. We cannot discuss individual cases and our recommendations in individual cases um, and policies. That is not the same as we can't publish recommendations. So we may have reviewed a policy, we've made a recommendation regarding a policy. That exchange, those recommendations back and forth, we can't talk about. We can't say we recommended to the department they do the following. And what we told them and when we told them that. That is not the same as making a recommendation in a public setting going forward. So, for example, let's use EBD. Before the chief began speaking about his recommendations, which frankly opened the door to everything. Their original draft to us and our recommendations back, we were not able to share. That is not the same as us not having the ability to later publish recommendations that we are making going forward with the policy. So another example might be if we make recommendations regarding a policy, but they don't follow those recommendations, we may then publish what recommendations are we making now going forward. Does that make sense? We can't talk about what was deliberated on, what was discussed, but we can still publish. And that's how we published the George Floyd report. That's how we published the Michael Marshall report. That's how we published our recommendations on EBD. And most specifically, we have included that kind of information in our semi-annual report that came out in November. We made recommendations regarding EBD. I believe there were some other recommendations there. The other way in which we can do it that we haven't been able to do it, because if you look at the ordinance, it talks about presenting the information, this information about recommendations and reports in statistical and summary form or in aggregate form. And prior to now, we have not had the ability to put that information into a data process, a data program that we can then extract information from, mine to report to the community. We have, just in way of background, we have been attempting to do that for years. Way before I started, it is my understanding that there were several attempts to do. We asked the city to provide us with a database that was rejected. The office on several occasions tried to create its own database. Those efforts were shut down because it had to be created by the city. There had to be interface. It's more technical information than I'm familiar with. But there have been many, many years that we have been trying to obtain this. Finally, in 2022, the city agreed to create a database for us in which to store all of this information, so we could at some point make public that exactly that you're talking about, is what is happening inside internally, but in a statistical and summary form. We TS agreed to give us that database in 2022. They created it in 2023. We started working with it in 2023. Actually entering some information and working out the kinks in 2023 and entering data beginning later 2024 and now in 2025. For the first time in our most recent semi-annual report, we did present some information in aggregate form. We plan to continue doing so in different aspects of both investigations and in discipline. Most recently, the data that we presented was with in reviewing recommendations made by the OIM to the departments. So the department does the investigation, then it comes to us for a review. We can then return the case to the departments for further investigation. For the police department, we returned cases for investigation in 34.7% of the cases. And for the sheriff's department, for the administrative investigation unit of the Department of Safety, we returned cases 56.2% of the time. This is just the beginning. We plan to continue to provide information similar to what was identified by the auditor. Were relevant questions asked? Were there leading questions asked? Are we satisfied with the investigation? Did they follow our recommendations? How often did they follow our recommendations? What kind of cases? That's all transparency, I believe, and that is the way that we can do it. We had not had the opportunity to do that till now, and we are beginning to do that now.
And I appreciate
there's
you
a couple of things, that I wanted to go back that you gave really good examples of. But Dr. Davis, go ahead, and then I'll come
because
back.
you really went into the micro, and maybe Dr. Coloron's question will be more appropriate before you answer this one. But I want to get to the macro, and this is this. As it relates, again, I want to talk about perception within the community. We have women, and I can't think of a group that's more vulnerable when interacting with a male officer than a female citizen. We have women who have alleged that they were sexually assaulted by Denver Police Department. And we as a community do not trust, and Denver has said this in every election where there's been a ballot initiative, we do not trust the Denver Police Department to investigate itself. We want a strong independent monitor. So the type of questions that we're looking for, while the micro is wonderful, from a macro level, how can we be assured that officers are being held accountable and investigations are being run thoroughly when women are alleging that they were sexually assaulted by police officers in the city of Denver by Denver Police Department officers? When stuff like that happens, to have the department, to have DPD say we investigated ourselves and we found and we did nothing, we found that we did nothing wrong, and then to have the independent monitor to say we were part of the investigation, but we can't tell you what we can't tell you anything about it. That may sound right legally, but that's not what Denver is asking for. So what I'm really trying to get at here in all of my questions is how do we get the independent monitor to assure us, and this has been done in the past, so it's possible to do it, to assure us that from a community, from a citizen's perspective, everything is being done to protect, again, the most vulnerable. I can't think of anyone more vulnerable than a woman being pulled over by a police officer, to protect the most vulnerable from someone who may be a predator behind the badge. How is your office making sure that the community knows that you're fighting tooth and nail to ensure that predators in the department are not allowed to just be investigated by their buddies and declared innocent?
Well, and I was going to go, that's great setting up,
Yes.
because that's where I was going to go with the monitor's examples, which I thought were really good ones. And that is, we know of these situations. How could it be done in a more transparent way? So one was EBD, or evidence or education-based discipline, or whatever else they're calling it. So we have been part of that, working together, opposing that change together. However, that conversation about whether to change our policy happened even months before we knew as the public. And it was a conversation between the police department and the monitor's office before the rest of us even got word on it. And so what it did is, I think, put us at a disadvantage where we were then trying to play catch up about all of these other conversations that had happened that we're not able to be privy to because of deliberative process privilege. But I think that it would have been appropriate to say there is a contemplation of a change of policy, and I want to get input from the public about this. So that's one thing. I think we weren't brought in until 6 months at least after those conversations started. Another example is those special reports that you pointed out, which were, I think, really good examples, Michael Marshall, Black Lives Matter, etc. I think the difference with those is that we were part of pushing for those reports too. And so rather than them just kind of springing out of the monitor's office, and I know Monitor Perez Castle, that was before your time, we were like part of the collaboration of getting a report out, because what we were saying is that we are concerned that we not just have the police themselves or the sheriff's department, monitor themselves, but there are things going on and we need a report, an investigation, because we all don't know what we don't know, but we know something is not happening. And then a third example is in reading your latest report, which you all talk about. I think there was terms that were changed. So you all measure like infractions, not infractions, but use of force incidents, right, that you investigate in the aggregate and give the percentage of how many reports. But then there was a term that was changed, not by you all, but I don't know if the city attorney's office, but it's something about violation of mayor's executive rules or something, which covered a lot of things like use of force. So it appeared, just reading it, that the police department, mayor's office, whoever, were trying to put a softer spin on those infractions by just calling it violations of mayoral executive orders. That could have been a conversation with community about, hey, guess what? They are now changing these use of force or whatever these infractions that we are all familiar with and lumping them under a better sounding terminology. To me, that's not about a deliberative process privilege conversation. We don't need to know the legal going back and forth, but we do need to know that there is a controversy that is impacting the community, and we need to be aware that this change is happening and then solicit input from us about that change and what our thoughts or concerns are. So, Monitor Perez Castle, what do you think?
Great discussion. Thank you. I'll try and take these in kind of in order. With regards to specific cases and recommendations and investigations, the example of a woman who has been sexually assaulted by a police officer, I'm not going to say is extreme. We know that there have been these cases. We know that there have been these accusations. Most recently this week, an officer was arrested, a Denver police officer was arrested for sexual assault. The ordinance does not allow us to impose our recommendation on the department. We simply make recommendations, the departments make recommendations, those recommendations go up to the director of safety. Our power is in publishing information about those reports, about those cases. So, yeah, I can't say we recommended X, Y, and Z, but we can identify those cases in our reporting, and that is my understanding of how it has been done and we continue to do. I will identify one case in our most recent report, which was the Lodo shooting that occurred and in that case, in our report, we did identify that we felt that the investigation was not sufficient. And there was an evaluation of the policy with regards to Officer Ramos. And the reason we can mention Officer Ramos and name him publicly is because his name was already published through the city because it was a very public prosecution. But the other officers, officers B and C, we and it's on page 35 of our report. We made a determination that the OIM reviewed this case and made recommendations to DPD and Department of Safety. We cannot say what those recommendations were. However, we go on to state the OIM finds that the review of the case as it pertains to officers B and C is insufficient. And then we lay out why we believe the investigation is insufficient. So we are able to highlight cases and make some commentary about those cases. What we can't say is exactly what we recommended. And again, fortunately or unfortunately, this is how the system was created, in the fact that the monitors can make recommendations, but we can't impose discipline. And that we can go down the rabbit hole on that conversation, and I would love to continue having that conversation, because that potentially is something that would require an ordinance change, but is it the best form of oversight? Because if we are then making disciplinary decisions, then someone has to oversee us. So another discussion for another day. With regards to EBD, I will tell you, it wasn't 6 months. You knew about it almost as soon as I did. Because I reached out to community members. And the reason I was able to do that is not because a policy had been shared with me. I didn't get the policy until January 2nd, I believe. It was because the chief had already done outreach regarding this program to, I believe it was Together Colorado and some members of potential, I believe it was the Ministerial Alliance. So once he had already publicly shared this proposal, that is not the policy, because I didn't get the policy until January 2nd. This proposal, we were approached in December, I believe it was December 6th of 2024, and not soon after that, you knew about it. The actual policy, the draft that was given to us, I could not share because of the deliberative process privilege. And it is incredibly frustrating, especially when the chief or the department is talking about what the policy is going to be, and we're reading it and going, no, that's not what it says. At the point, however, that the chief began talking about specific recommendations, that opened the door for us to be able to publicly discuss what our recommendations were, and where we agreed and disagreed. But even if that had not happened, let's assume that had not happened, deliberative privilege does not prevent us from publishing to the public recommendations we are making regarding a policy. So again, just to clarify, we can't publish recommendations we made. We can publish recommendations we are making and continue to make. EBD was a test of this, and I will agree with you, it was very frustrating for me, and felt like I was fighting with one hand tied behind my back. But I made he pierced the privilege. And once he pierced the privilege, then it was open game. With regards to the specific rules on the use of force, this is something that was done without a new policy, and I will, to this day, they have not changed the matrix or the discipline handbook. Use of force is still under rules and regulations 3, I believe it's 306. However, we did see in, I believe it was 23 or 24, them categorizing it under failure to follow mayoral directives or something like that. And actually, we did publish that in our report. We published that change and we identified for the public, I believe it was in 2024, that we published this, and I apologize, I can't remember if it was a semi-annual report or the annual report, that they had done this and they had made this move. And the reason it was important is because it changed the category of use of force, which starts at D. So you have A through F. Starts at D, which is a minimum of 10 days, and goes all the way to F. Changing it to a violation of mayoral duties and responsibilities makes it an A through F. And we reported on that, and we reported on that change. Up to now, and I haven't checked recently, but we do continue to check. We were advised that no use of force would be treated any differently than a D, but that this was a better category to put it under. We have not seen someone who has been disciplined for a use of force violation that was, and again, as of the last time I did a report, not this most recent report, that seemed to be accurate. However, in retrospect, I have to think about, was that the beginning of EBD, right? Changing that category, and yes, making it now A through F, so potentially A through C, an offense that would technically fall under EBD. And I appreciate your input, and I hadn't thought about it at the time, and I will in the future. When something like that happens, not just publish it in our report, but to reach out to stakeholders to let them know, to identify something specific like that is happening.
Yeah, definitely appreciate that. And yeah, I think there are times when we all get left out of the changes and then we're all scrambling to catch up. And this goes to, and I'm sure Dr. Dave, he's got some questions about community outreach, but just going to that, right? So it's one thing we've talked about, like specific examples of policy, and then there's that other piece of communicating that out so that we're all working on it together, because you're frustrated, I'm frustrated, a lot of us are frustrated when we find out stuff accidentally and don't get the intentionality from the people who are making these changes, and it's unnecessary. And finally, I'll just say I appreciate you as well picking up on that, because when I read about that change of the mayor's executive orders, I thought the same thing. This looks like how they're getting EBD passed subtly, or pieces of it, and implementing it in parts, and there's been no public conversation about that. And fundamentally, it's changing our police discipline system without public review or input. Dr. Davis, I think you were going to say something else. You're on mute.
I was going to go to a couple other questions. One of the things that I hear a lot coming is about, the deliberative privilege, and it appears that a lot of that is relying on interpretations by the city attorney. So I have a few questions, and I'm going to shoot them all out and kind of let you answer because they overlap with each other. So, why does the OIM submit draft public reports to the city attorney's office, mayor's office, and public safety agencies for review when that's not required by the city charter or ordinance? And then following along with that is, how does the OIM intend to address its over reliance on legal guidance from the city attorney's office, which also represents the mayor, the Department of Safety, especially regarding the reports that you put out. And then in vein with that as well is, have you sought independent legal counsel on deliberative privilege? And if not, why not? I know there's a whole lot of questions thrown out at once. I can
No, no
go
problem.
back through them step by step if you want me to.
No, I think I got it. Um, why do we submit our reports to the agencies and the city attorney's office and the mayor's office? I will note that a NACOL, National Association of Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement, it's the national organization of community and professional oversight, does recommend that reports be shared with the departments. And that is so they don't, and typically what we're looking for is, did we get some statistic wrong? Did we make a factual inaccuracy? We don't give it to them to change our reports. We give it to them to address in case we made a mistake or we got something wrong. And that is what is recommended by NACOL. With regards to the city attorney's office, the city attorney's office does not get to determine what we say or we don't say. I want to be clear about that. They cannot tell us, you can't say that. They can say to us, if you say that, you could be in violation of deliberative privilege, but it's we who make the decision about what we will and will not publish. And we have been doing this now for 20 years, and we know the parameters pretty much of what deliberative privilege is. So, the city attorney's office can make editory comments like spelling, language, wording, provide updates on appeal cases. The city attorney's office is, yes, they represent the city and county of Denver, but they are also compartmentalized. And they represent all independent agencies, including the auditor's office. So if the auditor's office needs legal advice, they go to the city attorney's office. Individual agencies have individual city attorneys. And what they do, and it's a legal term, it's called a Chinese wall. They build a Chinese wall again with the lawyers. So let's say there's 10 city attorneys and there's 5 agencies and they're separated to each. They do not discuss their representation of the agency with other city attorneys. So there's nothing I can do about the appearance of the conflict, right? We are a city agency. We have to have legal counsel, and our legal counsel is the city attorney's office. My understanding of the independent legal counsel, because we haven't had the opportunity to use it, is if a conflict arises in which we cannot, there is no medium, or there is no either consideration or compromise, we are completely at odds with the advice of the city attorney, then we can seek independent counsel for a second opinion to advise us. That has not happened, at least not while I've been the monitor. That has not happened. And it is not that the city attorney's office is telling us what we can and can't publish. They can make recommendations, or they can say this might be a violation of deliberative privilege. We may want to say it in another way, but we are the ultimate deciders of what goes into our report. With regards to giving a copy of the report to the mayor. If I had to say, and again, I'm not real clear, that might be a vestige of from when the OIM was under the purview of the mayor. And the mayor used to appoint the independent monitor. So we continue to send a copy of it to the mayor, and they can make comments. They have not. So it's, and I have notes myself separate. I can't read my own notes. So does that answer some of the question?
Yeah, I think that example of whether it goes to the mayor's office or not, I think that's an example of, is it by ordinance or is it by policy? And so somewhere along the line, someone made a policy decision to send it to the mayor's office. My understanding is in the past, sometimes they would change reports, but I think you're right that that's when the monitor's office was also under the mayor's office and was appointed. Um, just a quick follow-up question that I have, when they say to you, well, that might be a violation of deliberative privilege, to me, that sounds kind of like a threat, because they're the ones who would then, come after you. I mean, like, what's the threat? Because they can claim deliberative privilege about just about anything. And they do a lot of times, including things that they shouldn't be claiming that privilege for the mayor. So, like, what's their point of saying, hey, well, that might be a violation? And then what?
Well,
And on
I
top
think
of that, I'm just listening. And then what are you doing to ensure that they're not just claiming deliberative privilege on everything, and that you're getting some kind of counsel or advice that can push back on their claims?
this is an abstract question for me because I have not had this happen. So let's see. Then it's a choice, right? We might work on the wording, right? Is it something about, is it the information? Is it about the wording? Is it about the facts? So we may take another look and see if there's another way to do it.
Well, I
That's
guess
what I
I'm
would
just
do.
surprised.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I guess I'm just surprised when you say it hasn't come up, because I think that when, with regard to EBD, it came up a lot, that this is deliberative privilege, and therefore I can't discuss it with you all, community. And I'm like, so it has come up, or is it your interpretation that it's deliberative privilege? I mean, I don't want to drag this out, but it seems like
Right.
that was one of the critiques by the auditor, is that there was so much under deliberative privilege. It made me wonder, well, what if you spoke on it? What's going to happen? Because
Um,
it hasn't been tested, it sounds like.
well, I think if let's say the city attorney's office says this this is a violation of deliberative privilege, and we go ahead and we publish it, then we put our office at risk of litigation.
But with
Um,
who? The city?
it could be with the departments. It could be, I don't know. I mean, I could see if we publish something and the departments are saying you're in violation of the ordinance, you're in violation, so we are no longer going to share information with you. Because the only way that we can get access to the information is because they share it with us. So I think that that would be a detriment to oversight. I also think that it could potentially expose us to litigation. If the city is the one who told us, and these are hypotheticals, okay, because like I'm saying, I'm kind of thinking of how this would go. If the city is saying that's a violation and we go ahead and publish anyway, and it is a violation, to what degree are they going to represent us, or can they represent us? I mean, they're going to have to represent us because they're our attorney. However, they told us that this was going to happen. I think it would lead to it would impact oversight and expose. I suppose it's a legal jeopardy. It could
But
cause
it seems like they can use that anyway. So I know we need to move on, but here's my point. If they tell you everything is deliberative privilege that they don't want the public to know about, and your office never tests that, even though maybe you have a question about maybe this is not deliberative privilege, and the public has a right to know. We don't know because we've never been there. It seems like we just take the word of the city attorney's office, who is conflicted because they are there to protect the mayor and the police chief. And then we have an independent monitor that's protecting also the public's interest. And there really isn't a test, a legal test to say, no, city attorney's office, I think you're wrong. And we are going to say something. And now let's figure it out. Is a city suing the city? So I'm just saying, I think they're overusing it, and I think it's being over relied on because it's never been tested. So I would just suggest that when there's an instance where you feel strongly and your team feels strongly that no, this should not be a matter of deliberative privilege, the public needs to know this, that we test that.
Thank you.
I'm going to open up the floor in just a little bit because the people who have questions. A couple of things, two other questions and we have some questions we'll probably just submit to you. I appreciate the ones that you've already answered in writing, and we'll probably submit a couple other ones to you for review in writing. But the city auditor reports that he was unable to access key recommendations. And I'm curious about what you're going to do to ensure that the auditor and the public have access to these reports.
I think when the auditor says he didn't have access to recommendations, he's talking about wanting to see the specific recommendations going back and forth between the Department of Safety and the OIM. And I cannot give him access to that. That database belongs to the Department of Safety, in addition to the fact that it's a violation of deliberative privilege. Regardless of the fact that it's a violation of deliberative privilege, I am not the owner of the database. That is the Department of Safety.
And maybe this is something that legally cannot be done, but using again the most egregious thing that has happened recently, which is the allegations of sexual assault by police officers. I would be curious in knowing what is the process that DPD uses to investigate these allegations of sexual assault without calling names. This is based off of X amount of cases that have been brought to our department through to the allegations that have been brought and investigated. This is the process that DPD uses. This is some of our concerns with that process. That doesn't call any particular officer into account, but we know DPD has a process. Community doesn't know what that process is. And community has no idea how your office is also engaging in that process. So these are when we talk when I talk about reports, and again, I know I can speak for at least for a handful of others that are on this call. When we talk about reports, those are the type of things as well that we want to know. What does it look like? What's going on behind the scene? And it doesn't have to include the names of officers or specific cases. But again, to be told by DPD, we investigated ourselves and found that we did nothing wrong. And then to be told by your office, I can't comment on that because I'm not allowed to discuss it. That really does bring a level of paranoia to people like myself and others in the community who already are concerned that law enforcement circles the blue wall to protect itself.
So, and I want to be clear, there's two kinds of investigations. So when an officer is charged, any internal investigation is kind of put on hold because there's a criminal investigation. So the criminal investigation will proceed forward first, And then once that is completed, then the internal investigation will begin.
And again, the community has no idea how it looks when the internal investigation proceeds. What is the process that DPD uses? How is your office ensuring oversight? These, again, the annual reports we really do appreciate, but these are very specific types of reports that community is concerned about. With how does it look when an officer is accused, when an officer is involved in a shooting? What does that process look? What are some of your concerns with how the process flows? That again, and I'm not a lawyer, never been to law school or anything close to it, but that again doesn't address any particular officer. It addresses a entire process, how the investigation goes. Again, your office, in my estimation, one of its key responsibilities is to ensure to the community that we are doing everything in our power to to protect you, to protect you from officers, from the bad apples, from the one or two bad apples in the bunch, using their language. We're doing our best to protect you from the one or two bad apples that just happen to slip through the cracks. We're that second line of defense to make sure that they don't harm the community. And we're not getting that type of assurance that that's happening. And that's troubling for me. And I'm going to just be honest and transparent with you. That's troubling for me, because we're not getting that type of transparency. I have one.
I
I'll let you respond, but please.
real quick, I would we did do some things like that, something similar. But I hear what you're saying. And again, this is regarding the Lodo shooting. It's on page 35 of our semi-annual report, and encourage you to take a look at it. And then maybe we can engage on, does
And
that kind of
again,
hit the mark, and are we talking about something similar like that?
and I think the semi-annual reports are wonderful. But when we look at the George Floyd report, that was a very special report that addressed a very specific issue that was taking place in the city. So sometimes when you're looking at a semi-annual report, that's covering everything, and we appreciate that. But for individuals in the community that this is not their full-time work or focus, to have a special report, which is why the George Floyd report received not only local but national attention, because it was its own individual report that community members could go straight to and say, we are concerned, back to the sexual assault issue. I hate to keep on harping on that one, but I think it is really important that we can look at and say, here is the report specifically about sexual assault and what's going on. Here's a report specifically about police shootings in the last 3 years and how those investigations were handled and what concerns were, without calling names. Just, this is how investigations have transpired. This is what, and this is where we think our recommendations for how those investigations could be improved. Those types of investigations could be improved. Those specific type of reports really do help the community to have one thing it can pull rather than having to go through a whole annual or semi-annual report.
Dr.
And
Davis, I think that's an excellent recommendation. I don't think we've ever had a gender-based violence report that
Yeah.
focuses on the complaints, and they've just kind of been spotty here or there, but we know that it's systemic, and I've never been able to get the public safety department to respond with a gender-based approach around. It's not just um, civilians who've complained about these things. It's also women in law enforcement who've complained about them. So having a special report around gender-based harassment and violence, I think would be pretty important and maybe even groundbreaking. The last just quick question that I have, Monitor Perez Castle, and it could just be a quick yes or no. One of the other things that the auditor talked about was a lack of a strategic plan.
So that was about to
And
ask.
if I read your response correctly, like it's never been done, or the auditor's response, it was never really done. So, and you accepted that recommendation to do it. What I would want to know, or what we'd want to know, is will you be willing to have impacted community members be part of that strategic planning process? And maybe it's for a segment of it, but I think it's important to have what community members feel is what should be the future direction of the monitor's office. What are the wins that we want to make sure that we keep and we protect? So I think that would be a good exercise to go through and to invite those from impacted communities, those who have been involved with the creation or the support of the monitor's office to be part of that conversation and just, have it open to folks who are interested. And that's it with my question.
I guess I would be interested in what are your thoughts about that, about bringing the community into the creation and development of a strategic plan, along with your others?
I had not thought about it. I certainly will consider it. We are in the early stages of kind of just putting this together based upon just all of the things that happened this year between EBD and the audit. We made it clear both to the auditor and the COB. This was actually a COB request, and we'll be working with the COB in terms of our strategic plan and potentially align those strategic plans to the degree that they align. But we're just scratching the surface now.
So should we make that ask to COB as well? I mean, I don't understand what the downside would be of how, we're talking about, we want more community input into the police process. I wish they had a strategic planning session that we could also be a part of, but, so I think it would be a good step, especially in line of the critique from the auditor's office that you disagree with around the lack of transparency, to show, hey, yeah, let's go ahead and do this with community. So I would just really encourage you to say yes. And we'll also make the same ask of the COB.
Before I open the floor for individuals who are on this call to ask any questions, I want to just say, as you already know, I'm stating the obvious, that we are invested. Everyone on this call is invested in your success personally, but then more specifically in your office's success. This city needs to have strong oversight. We want to be a model for the nation on how community has a voice in protecting itself from rogue officers and from harmful policing practices. And so that is our ultimate goal. And we want to work with you to accomplish that. So with that being said, I know there may be others on the call who have questions. I appreciate y'all's patience in letting us go through all of those questions with the monitor. Anybody, raise your hand again. I put a few hands down. Is this the time to raise your hand again? All right, nobody's raising their hand. Everybody's okay. I'm about to say that. Okay, Brandy, go ahead. You have the floor.
Everybody gets a question, so, or at least got to the ambiguousness of it all. That's all I wanted to say. I don't
Thank
want to
you.
say too much.
Thank you so much. Anyone else? Any questions for the monitor while we have her? Yes, Jesse.
Yes, in addition to a sex-based report, have we had a race-based report as well?
Well, I think what Lisa was talking about was relative to sexual violence.
Like, have we had a report done based off of anti-Black hatred within the police department?
I think that's a very good report to put out as it relates to how. Yes.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what was the
Anti-Black
report done based off of anti-Black hatred within the Denver Police Department?
Like discrimination? I
Yeah,
mean,
so,
I mean, that's another way of putting it. Yeah.
well, that was the George Floyd protest report did focus on the racial dynamics as well. I think Nick Mitchell was good about capturing a lot of our voices and concerns around racism and discrimination. I think that there are people of color in Denver who are concerned about racial profiling. Indigenous communities are disproportionately targeted. Latinos in particular are actually the number one population who are killed by law enforcement violence in Colorado. So, maybe it's time for another look at the racial dynamics, but I would want to make sure that we were looking at the populations of color and so that we could see that certain populations are impacted differently by law enforcement violence. So, I think we're open to that kind of conversation, what that could look like.
I mean, I wouldn't word it so ambiguously, but yeah, I could get with something like that.
Well, I hope I wasn't ambiguous. I'm pretty, I haven't been accused of that, but Amy,
No,
I
it's
see
like
your
when I
hand
hear
up.
people of color and marginalized,
Well, I was very specific.
traumatized,
Indigenous
all that type of
people,
stuff, like
yeah.
it's broad ambiguous
Indigenous
language.
people, Latinos, and Black folks, of course, how are they impacted through the system? It would be great to look at those statistics for each population. So, I don't think people of color is just so ambiguous, but I agree with you, Jesse, that we can drill down on each population of people who experience different forms of law enforcement violence, discrimination, etc.
I'm gonna
Amy.
move on to Amy. Yes, I'm gonna move on to Amy. Go ahead.
All right. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. So what I want to chat about is outside of the scope uh, of the OIM's office, but it's been something that's been brewing now for a couple of years, and it's growing and it's getting bigger. And so I think um, I want our city to get some sort of plan around this. It's the other enforcers that DPD has been bringing in. And so it started, what, three years ago with the set team. So Armando created the set team. Now, the set team enforced on the unhoused, and they were cruel to the unhoused. They were trained to be that way by DPD. And so the SEC team earlier this year got transitioned off of the unhoused and on to the 16th Street Mall. Well, they're still enforcing on unhoused, but they were transitioned to the 16th Street Mall, and they stopped going around to the encampments that were around the city. Another thing that happened in DPD's pursuit of getting people, what do I want? How do I want to put this? To get citizens to enforce on citizens is what it comes down to.
Yeah.
So a couple of years ago, DPD contracted with the Dream Center. And they got the Dream Center to start enforcing on the unhoused, primarily in the ballpark neighborhood. Now, that contract then transitioned away from DPD to the ballpark JID. And so now the ballpark JID has a direct contract with the Dream Center to enforce on the unhoused and give them move along orders, which is illegal, right? We know that. And And so now I'm really, really disturbed about the contract that went through at City Council a couple of weeks ago, the $3 million contract with Urban Alchemy, because Urban Alchemy is now coming in to enforce. And I argued that with several city council members because I said, look, if you're going to be going down and if this group is going to be enforcing along South Broadway, then the new Broadway bid should be paying for that. Not just the general taxpayers of Denver, in the same way that the ballpark did pays for the Dream Center now. And so, council approved that contract. And not only did they approve it, despite the fact that the service provider has a RICO case against them, just got dumped by Austin for lying about their performance numbers. Plus a whole host of other lawsuits. All you have to do is Google Urban Alchemy and see how much litigation is against this company. So now they've brought them in. And after the vote, there were a couple of council members who were essentially courting Urban Alchemy from the dais and saying, gosh, why don't you come and talk to me in my district about what you're going to be doing? And so my concern is that city council, because they don't want to do their job and create affordable housing and other options, they're just jumping on the train of enforcement. Let's just enforce on the unhoused. And if we can't solve the problem, then we're just going to harass them and literally eventually kill them. And so if city council members are all jumping on board because there was a $3 million contract, I am really concerned that there are going to be several other contracts that come forward for Urban Alchemy. So Urban Alchemy also
I'm
has
sorry,
some cases
Amy, let me
against
just
them.
jump in here because we do want to direct these questions toward the Independent Monitor. And I know this is your wheelhouse, but
No,
is there a
I get
specific
that.
question for the Independent
Yeah.
Monitor?
Yeah, so let me just say that also in San Francisco, their RICO case is because they were drug trafficking in the encampments. They were sex trafficking, female homeless. And so I'm just wondering, now that DPD is taking enforcement off of their plate and putting it on just average citizens that have a contract, how are we going to start holding these new service providers, as well as the SET team, accountable, because we don't have any mechanisms in our local government for accountability with them, but they're doing the same or very similar job as the police. So how do we get accountability around those groups? I guess that would be my question.
And what is your role with oversight of investigations for set officers and people of that nature?
That I can answer. We only oversee post-certified officers or deputies, certified law enforcement. So we do not.
And I get
that.
I understand that, but there is no mechanism for these groups. They're doing the bidding of police. So is there a way that we can either get these groups in under the IM, or do we have to create a separate mechanism? Because there is no way to lodge any real complaint against any of these folks right now.
So I see Brandy's hand. I'm going to go to her because unfortunately, and this is something that we need to circle back around with and figure out how we hold, and we've been fighting set for the last few years, but how we hold the city accountable, because that's a loophole that they're using, and we need to figure out how do we work around that. The same thing with these private security guard companies that they hire, is a Allied, I think, is one of the major ones. Is a easy way to get around that community oversight accountability. Brandy.
Well, and just before you
Okay.
move off of that, I think Amy's question was directed to the monitor. So, Liz, do you have any thoughts or recommendations, or is this something we need to take up with city council on an ordinance? Because this has been something that has been an issue since the creation of that team, that there is absolutely no accountability except under the executive director of safety purview, whether they discipline them or not. So do you have any thoughts? I'm sure you've gotten complaints from the public about them. And what do you do with those complaints?
I can't recall about any specific complaints. I'm not saying that there haven't been. My recollection of my last conversation with Director Saldate about that is that there is a complaint process, similar to filing a complaint on it, because it falls on the Department of Safety. And so there are several groups like that. So one is the traffic kind of enforcement folks. One is SET, one is the dispatchers, and that there is a complaint process for that.
But there's no independent review, right?
Not that I hate to lead you wrong, but I don't know. I'm not that I'm aware of. I was just told that there is a complaint process. I don't know how formal it is and how it is reviewed or what is done, but that there is a complaint process.
So that's something, Dr. Davis, we need to follow up on with maybe one of our city council members, to see. I mean, I think it's ridiculous that we have folks with enforcement power and there's no independent review by the monitor's office. So it seems like something needs to change. And I recognize that the monitor's office would need additional funds to review those cases. So got it.
And then there's
Thanks.
okay, Brandy's going to be our last one because we're already 8 minutes over, and I want to be respectful of the monitor's time and appreciative of her showing up today. Brandy?
Well, I have two things to say, really. If we're the ones who are initially the ones that created something like SET, then we should have put something in place for these type of oversights, over being able to oversee them, because we have no control over it. It's like almost like, well, here it is, we got this, we did
We
this.
didn't put SET in place. That was Armando Saldate. We did not put SET in place. He put SET in place in opposition to our clear demands that we did not want SET to be in place. We could not have been clearer. We wrote letters, met with him, protested. That has nothing to do. Nobody in community that I'm aware of was asking for SET.
My fault. I apologize. Okay, I apologize. Here's my other question, though, seriously. Is with the alchemy thing, are they in lieu of what happened with some what do you call it, Salvation Army? Are they the ones that replaced Salvation Army's bid? Like
So Brandy, there were two different contracts that went through at City Council. One was for 30 million to run the DoubleTree, and they replaced Salvation Army at the DoubleTree. And then there was a separate contract for 3 million. That's the one we specifically asked council to vote no on. And that was for enforcement. And let me tell you, if you watch that city council presentation that night and that vote, they said they will be enforcing on anyone that does not exhibit pro-social behavior.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't even matter what your housing status is. If you're not exhibiting pro-social behavior, they will enforce on you. And that came out in that council session.
All right.
So,
Well, thank you. Yeah, thank you for clearing that up. And I apologize. I apologize. Speaking out of pocket. My brain was running a mile, 20 miles an hour. I apologize. Thank you for answering that, and thank you to the independent monitor and everybody who's present. My fault. Sorry about that. Thank you.
Well, thank y'all so much. And again, um, Monitor Castle, we have a couple of questions we didn't get a chance to get to today. This was a very constructive conversation. I hope that um, you're able to hear what the various recommendations are from our side and are willing to implement them. We have additional questions that we'll submit to you. I'm heading out of town for a funeral, but when I get back, I'll be submitting the additional questions to you. Well, that's fabulous. Christmas is coming. So after the holiday, I'll give you a chance to at least I'll give you at least one day to enjoy your family. So after the holiday, I'll send you those other follow-up questions, and then once you send those back to us, we will distribute them to the rest of the members of the task force.
Thank you, everybody. I really have enjoyed our conversation, and a lot of, as we indicated to the auditor, we're ready to review and take a fresh look at everything. So your input is valuable to us. Just real quick, I think I may have responded to this in the questions that you sent me. But if there is question about timeliness, there is a timeliness graph on page 14 of the audit report. You can take a look at it. It's their graph, not our graph, but it does include the OIM's time.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And yes, I will. We'll get all of those questions when we compile it. We'll send it out to everybody. All right. If
Everyone
there's
have a
nothing
blessed
else,
holiday and happy seasons, and be safe.
yes. Take care, everyone. Thank y'all so very much for your work and leadership in our community. Have a great night.